A truck horn blares, the agonizing screech of tires cuts through the Philadelphia night. On the wet pavement, a young man named David lies completely still. This was not a random accident. What forces a proud, loving father to raise his hand against his own son? What secret family debt could push a family to the breaking point? And where was Max, the loyal German shepherd who sensed the disaster unfolding long before the truck's horn ever sounded? This is the story of how one man's greatest fear became a self-fulfilling prophecy. The November air was sharp enough to sting, carrying the smells of exhaust and damp brick. Jacob Adebayo pulled the worn collar of his work jacket tighter, his tall frame silhouetted by the weak security light of the apartment complex. Beside him, a low, impatient whine emerged. "Patience, Max," Jacob murmured. The dog, a magnificent German shepherd of 6 years, looked up, his intelligent eyes fixed on Jacob's face. His coat was a thick storm cloud gray, fading to white on his chest and legs. He was a creature of duty, his temperament a near-perfect mirror of the man beside him, watchful, serious, and fiercely loyal. Max nudged Jacob's calloused hand, his silent signal that their evening patrol of the building was complete. Jacob was the super of this South Philadelphia block. He was a solidly built man in his late 50s, his face lined with the pride and worry of an immigrant who had seen too much since leaving Lagos in 1993. He managed these 3 floors with an iron grip, believing deeply in order, respect, and the tangible results of proper work. As they rounded the corner by the dumpsters, Jacob's sensitive ears caught the sound of a scuffle and a high, pleading voice cutting through the city din. 3 older teens, the ones who called themselves the crew, had a younger boy pinned against the brick wall. Jacob recognized him, Marcus, a thin, polite kid from the 2nd floor. The leader, a youth in a red beanie, shoved him hard. "Where is it, little man? You know the rules." Jacob's blood boiled. He hated disorder. He hated bullies. "That is enough!" Jacob's voice boomed across the alley, his heavy Nigerian accent making the words sound even more severe. The teens turned, their expressions annoyed, until they saw Max. Max did not bark. He took 2 steps forward, lowered his head, and a deep, rattling growl rumbled in his chest. It was a sound that promised consequences. The leader held Jacob's gaze for a long second, his eyes flicking from the imposing man to the silent, threatening dog. He recognized Jacob, the strict super. He scoffed, motioning to his friends. "Whatever, let's go." They sauntered off, but the leader looked back, his eyes lingering on Max. He had remembered them. Jacob's apartment smelled of frying plantains. He double-locked the door while Max went straight to his water bowl. His wife, Naomi, a woman whose kind eyes always looked tired, was at the stove. Sarah, their bright-eyed 18-year-old daughter, was buried in college applications at the small kitchen table. But another sound cut through the domestic peace, the insistent, dull thump-thump-thump of a digital beat. Jacob's face tightened. He walked down the short hall and pushed open the last door. There was David, his son. At 19, David was thin but intense, hunched over an old laptop. He wore heavy headphones, speaking low, fast words into a cheap microphone propped up on textbooks. Jacob reached down and yanked the headphone plug from the laptop. The beat stopped. "What, Dad? This is what you do all day?" Jacob demanded, his voice dangerously quiet. This noise? Wasting electricity? Wasting your mind?" "It's not noise, Dad. It's music," David said, the familiar frustration rising in his own voice. "This is not a future," Jacob snapped, gesturing angrily. "You think this pays for a roof? For food? You must learn a proper trade. An electrician, a plumber, something real." David just looked away, his jaw set in stubborn silence. Max, sensing the familiar tension, padded into the room. The big dog sat directly between them, letting out a soft, anxious whine, trying to bridge the gap that already felt miles wide. The following evening, the tension in the apartment was a living thing. Jacob, Naomi, and Sarah were moving around the kitchen in a strained silence, the unspoken conflict from the night before hanging in the air. A sharp, confident rap echoed from the front door. It was not the familiar knock of a neighbor. Jacob frowned and went to answer it, Max rising silently to stand beside him. The man in the hallway did not belong. He wore a crisp, inexpensive suit and carried a thin briefcase. His smile was polished, but it did not reach his cold, appraising eyes. He looked past Jacob into the apartment, his gaze lingering for a second on the old furniture. "May I help you?" Jacob asked, his voice firm. He instinctively moved to block the doorway. "Mrs. Naomi Adebayo?" the man asked, his tone pleasant. "I am her husband," Jacob said, his suspicion growing. "This is my home. You can speak to me." "Very well." The man, who introduced himself as Mr. Evans from Keystone Quick Cash, consulted a file. "I'm just here regarding an outstanding balance, a small payday loan taken out 3 months ago." Jacob's confusion was immediate. "We have no loans." "Jacob!" Naomi's voice was barely a whisper. She had come up behind him, her face pale. Mr. Evans's smile widened slightly. "The original loan was for $500, a simple clerical fee for a university application, I believe. As of today, with penalties and accumulated interest, the outstanding balance is $3,000. The air left Jacob's lungs. $3,000. It was the exact amount in the metal box under their bed. The money for Sarah's future. He turned slowly to his wife. "Naomi, what is this?" Tears welled in her eyes. "I didn't know what to do," she confessed, her voice breaking. "The application fees for Sarah, they were due. I thought I could pay it back before you noticed." The shame was suffocating. Jacob's pride, his one true shield, was shattered. It was not the debt, it was the secret. "Wait here," he said, his voice flat. He walked to the bedroom, retrieved the metal box, and counted out the entire sum onto the kitchen table. His hands, usually so steady, were shaking with a mixture of rage and humiliation. He shoved the cash toward Mr. Evans. The man counted it quickly. "A pleasure." He tucked the money away. "And just so you are aware, Mr. Adebayo, if this account had gone delinquent one more day, our collection team would have been assigned. They are significantly less polite." Jacob slammed the door before the man had fully turned. The bolt slid home with a heavy sound. Sarah was crying softly at the table. Jacob felt the walls of the apartment closing in. He needed to fix something, to control something. Then, through the heavy silence, he heard it, the faint digital tick-tick thump from David's room. He stormed down the hall. David, headphones on, was lost in his world, unaware of the crisis that had just unfolded. Jacob, seeing only this profound disrespect, this detachment, grabbed the cheap microphone from its stand. "Dad, no!" David ripped the headphones off, but it was too late. Jacob, trembling, held the microphone up. While this family is shamed, you hide in here with this noise?" He smashed the microphone against the desk. A sharp crack echoed in the small room. David stared, his face a mask of disbelief. "Why?" "You must learn what is real," Jacob shouted. "Real?" David jumped to his feet, his eyes flashing with a pain deeper than anger. "I was writing about you. I was writing about this family, about what you sacrificed, but you never listen." Jacob froze, his arms still raised. The broken pieces of the microphone lay on the floor between them. He looked at his son's anguished face, and for the first time, his own certainty wavered. The apartment air was still thick with the previous night's disaster. The $3,000, Sarah's future, was gone. Jacob felt a cold, simmering shame as he clipped the leash onto Max's collar. He needed to walk, to escape the silent accusations in his own home. Max, ever the stoic companion, trotted beside him. The big German shepherd, his gray and white coat, moving fluidly, seemed to be the only stable thing in Jacob's world. As they rounded the corner onto the main street, the harsh fluorescent light of Kim's bodega cut through the gloom. Mr. Kim, a small, gentle Korean man who had run the shop for 20 years, was usually stocking shelves at this hour. Tonight he was not. He was backed against his cigarette display, and the crew was in his store. The same 3 youths from the alley, led by the one in the red beanie. They were not browsing. They were leaning over the counter, their posture aggressive, blocking the exit. "We just want what's owed, Kim," the leader said, his voice carrying clearly to the street. "Payday loan, protection fee. It's all just business, right?" Jacob stopped dead. Business. The word hit him like a physical blow, instantly connecting to Mr. Evans's polite threat. Our collection team. These were not just neighborhood bullies. They were the muscle, the ones who came when the men in cheap suits failed. Mr. Kim was trembling. I paid last week." "This is a new fee," the leader sneered, grabbing a handful of candy bars. Fury, hot and immediate, eclipsed Jacob's shame. He had just been bled dry by this same invisible system. He would not stand by and watch it happen to another. He stepped directly into the doorway, his tall frame filling the space. Max, sensing the shift in his owner, planted his feet, his body instantly alert. "Leave him," Jacob commanded. The leader in the red beanie spun around. His eyes widened, first in recognition, then in pure annoyance. "You again? This ain't your business, old man." I said. "Leave him be," Jacob repeated, his voice low and unyielding. The leader took a threatening step toward him. Before he could move further, Max responded. A deep, menacing growl rumbled up from his chest. He lunged forward, not to attack, but to stand, rigid, directly between Jacob and the teen. A volley of loud, sharp barks erupted from him, the sound explosive in the small store. The crew froze. They were trapped between a furious 200-pound man and a 90-pound shepherd who looked ready to defend him. People on the sidewalk were stopping to look. The leader scoffed, trying to save face. "Whatever." He pointed a finger at Jacob, his eyes cold. "This is twice, old man. You stay out of our way." They shoved past the counter and bolted out the door, disappearing into the night. The silence they left was deafening. Mr. Kim, breathing hard, fumbled behind the counter. He came out holding a thick wad of cash. "Mr. Jacob, thank you. Thank you." He shoved the bills into Jacob's hand. "Please, for you, for the dog." Jacob looked down. It was $500. Pride, hot and insistent, screamed at him to refuse. He was not a man who took handouts. But the image of the empty metal box at home, of Naomi's shame, of Sarah's bright future dimming, it all flooded back. $3,000. His hand, which had been ready to push the money away, slowly closed around it. He accepted it. But the feeling was not relief. It was a cold, sharp bitterness. He had failed to protect his family's savings, and now he was accepting street corner money. He nodded once, curtly, unable to speak, and turned for home, the bills feeling heavier than stone in his pocket. It was past 2 a.m. A burst pipe in apartment 4C had taken hours to repair, and Jacob felt an exhaustion that went deeper than his bones. The $500 from Mr. Kim was a heavy, bitter lump in his pocket. It solved nothing. It only reminded him of the $3,000 he had lost. Max, who had waited patiently in the passenger seat of Jacob's old work truck, lifted his head with a soft whine as Jacob finally climbed in. "Home, Max," Jacob sighed, turning the key. The truck's engine grumbled to life, and he pulled onto the dark, empty streets. He drove slowly, his headlights cutting through the damp Philadelphia air. He was about to pass the Liberty Diner, a 24-hour beacon of fluorescent light, when a figure inside caught his eye. A young woman in a bright pink uniform, her hair pulled back, was clearing plates from a booth. Jacob slammed the brakes. The truck screeched and groaned in protest, and Max was thrown forward against the dash. "Sarah?" Jacob stared, his mind refusing to process the scene. His daughter, in a diner, at 2 a.m. He saw the booth she was cleaning. 2 men in heavy coats were laughing loudly as she worked. A cold, protective fury washed over Jacob, eclipsing his shame. He saw only danger. He saw disrespect. He saw his daughter in a place she was not supposed to be, surrounded by strangers in the dead of night. He left the truck idling in the street and stormed into the diner. The light bell above the door gave a cheerful, inappropriate jingle. "Sarah!" His voice cut through the low hum of the restaurant. Sarah spun around, a heavy tray balanced on one hand. Her face, pale with fatigue, instantly went white with fear. "Dad, what are you doing here?" He did not answer. He strode forward, grabbed her firmly by the arm, and began pulling her toward the door, past the stunned gaze of her manager at the counter. "Dad, stop, you're hurting me," she whispered, trying to pull free. "What are you doing?" He dragged her out onto the cold sidewalk, the neon sign painting their faces in shades of red and blue. "What am I doing?" he demanded, his voice low and vibrating with rage. "What are you doing? Shaming this family? Working in this place? With these men?" "It's a job!" Sarah cried, finally wrenching her arm from his grip. "I'm a waitress." "This is not a job for a daughter of mine," Jacob shouted, the loss of control, the loss of his money, the loss of his pride, all exploding at once. "You should be at home. You should be studying." "Studying?" The word came out as a broken sob, but it was edged with an anger Jacob had never heard from her. "Studying with what? How am I supposed to pay for anything?" Tears streamed down her face as she backed away, her small body trembling. "I'm working to earn back the money Mom lost, the money that was supposed to be for my applications. I'm here because we have nothing left." The accusation hit Jacob like a physical blow. He went silent. The sound of the truck's idling engine and the distant city sirens filled the space between them. He looked at his daughter, not as a child he needed to protect, but as a victim of his own family's failure. This was the second deeper blow. His children were now paying for his wife's mistake, for his failure. He was, as he had always feared, a man who could not protect his own. Jacob walked into the apartment like a man carrying an invisible, crushing weight. He did not speak. He went straight to the kitchen sink and stared into the empty basin, his back rigid. Sarah, who had followed him in, was crying silently at the table. Naomi looked between her husband and daughter, her hands twisting in her apron, helpless. The silence was heavier than any argument, broken only by the sound of Max's paws clicking nervously on the linoleum. The dog moved anxiously between Jacob and Sarah, whining softly, sensing the profound shift in the family's atmosphere. David emerged from his room. He saw his sister's tear-streaked face. He saw his father's stony silence. It was the final straw. "Stop it," David said, his voice quiet but sharp. Jacob did not move. "You break his microphone," David said, his voice rising as he pointed to himself. "You make her ashamed." He pointed at Sarah. You just break things. You only know how to be angry. You don't know how to fix anything." "David, please," Naomi whispered. "No." David stepped forward, standing between his father and his sister. "You come in here with all your pride, but you can't even see us. You can't see what's really happening. Can't you see we are breaking?" Jacob turned, his eyes hollow. He had failed to pay the debt. He had failed to protect his daughter. And now his son stood before him, accusing him of the one thing his pride could not bear, being a failure as a father. "You do not speak to me," Jacob whispered, his voice trembling. "I am—" "You are what, Dad?" David pressed, his own pain making him reckless. "The manager? The man in charge? You're just scared. And you make us all scared, too." In that moment, all the night's shame, the debt, the pipe, the diner, condensed into one intolerable point of pressure. Jacob did the one thing he could never take back. He raised his hand, and a sharp, cracking sound echoed through the apartment. David did not flinch. He simply stared, his cheek stinging, a look of profound, stunned betrayal on his face. The slap had broken the final thread. Without a word, David turned, walked into his room, and grabbed his backpack. He zipped it up with one quick, violent pull. "David, no!" Naomi cried, realizing what was happening. Max began to whine loudly, sensing the departure. He ran to the front door, scratching at the wood, looking back at David with desperate, confused eyes. David walked past his father. He paused only to rub Max's head, his voice thick. "Good boy, Max." Then he was out the door closed, and the bolt turned. David hit the sidewalk, his anger fueling his pace. He did not know where he was going. He just had to get away. Well, look who it is. He froze. The crew emerged from the shadows of the neighboring building. They had been waiting. The leader, the one in the red beanie, smiled. "Looks like Daddy's little boy," the leader taunted. "Where are you off to in such a hurry?" David tried to walk past them. They blocked his path. "We got a message for your old man," the leader said, his voice hardening. He likes getting in our business. Time to teach him a lesson." They lunged. David, in a burst of adrenaline, shoved one of them and ran. "Get him!" He sprinted, his backpack heavy, his heart pounding. He heard their footsteps thundering behind him. They were faster. He glanced back, terrified, and did not see the curb. He stumbled, panicked, and ran directly into the street, into the blinding headlights of an intersection. He heard the sudden, deafening blast of a truck's air horn and the agonizing screech of tires trying to grip the pavement. A massive delivery van jackknifed, but it was too late. The crew stopped dead on the sidewalk. They saw the impact. They saw David thrown to the pavement, landing terribly still on the wet asphalt. In an instant, their predatory confidence vanished, replaced by sheer panic. They turned and fled, disappearing back into the alley, leaving only the sound of the truck's ticking engine and the first rising shout of a witness. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and floor wax, a sterile scent that Jacob associated with failure. For 3 days he had sat vigil by his son's bed, watching the slow, rhythmic rise and fall of his chest. David was pale beneath the faint bruises, his leg in a cast, his head bandaged. A machine next to the bed produced a steady, rhythmic beep that charted the life Jacob had nearly broken. On the 4th day, David was still drifting in and out of sleep. Naomi and Sarah had gone home for a few hours. Jacob was alone, staring at the boy's still face. "David," he whispered. The word felt rough and unused in his throat. He leaned forward, his large hands clasped between his knees. I had a brother once, in Nigeria. Your uncle, Michael." He paused, the memory thick and heavy. He was like you. He had a light in him, music. He could sing, and the whole village would stop. A dreamer. Jacob's gaze drifted to the window, seeing not the Philadelphia skyline, but a dusty road from 1985. He wanted it all. He was impatient. He fell in with the wrong men who promised him everything. The music? It was not enough for him. He wanted the things the music brought, and it ruined him. He wiped a hand over his face. He was 22, a fight over nothing. I was the one who had to find him. He finally looked back at his son, his eyes burning. "When I see you," with the headphones, with the notebook, "I do not see you, David. I see Michael. I see his end." He leaned closer, his voice breaking. "I do not hate the music, my son. I am terrified. I am terrified of losing you, too." He said the words to a sleeping boy. He did not know if they were heard. A few days later, David was awake. He was alert, though he rarely spoke. The silence between him and Jacob was a fragile, unhealed thing. Jacob entered the room, his heavy work boots shuffling awkwardly on the clean floor. He was holding a small paper bag. David watched him, his eyes wary. Jacob did not meet his gaze. He walked to the bedside table and, with a fumbling motion, placed the bag down. He pulled out a box. It was a new microphone, a professional one, silver and heavy, far better than the cheap plastic one Jacob had smashed. David just stared at it. Jacob cleared his throat, a low, rough sound. He looked at the floor, at the wall, at the ceiling, anywhere but at his son. To continue the story, Jacob mumbled, gesturing awkwardly at the box. He finally forced himself to look at David. He saw the surprise, the confusion, and the flicker of understanding in his son's eyes. Jacob held his breath, ready for the anger, for the rejection. David looked at the microphone, then at his father's anguished face. Slowly, weakly, he reached out his hand. He did not reach for the microphone. He laid his hand on Jacob's forearm. Jacob flinched, then went very still. David's grip was weak, but it was there. It was the first time they had truly connected in years. Jacob covered his son's hand with his own, and finally, the rigid, proud wall he had built around his heart began to crumble. Sometimes the people who seem the most angry are just the ones who are the most afraid. Fear builds walls, but love, whether it's a quiet gift or a silent, loyal presence, is always waiting on the other side. If this story of Jacob, David, and Max resonated with you, we'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Please share it with someone who might understand, and consider liking and subscribing. It truly helps us create more stories like this one. Our next journey is waiting for you right now on the screen.